I came home to find every single thing I owned sitting on the wet lawn in the rain. Not packed, not stacked neatly by the door, scattered. My winter coats draped over the rose bushes. My laptop bag open on the grass, rainwater soaking into the zipper. 3 years of my life spread across my sister's front yard like a garage sale nobody wanted. My sister was standing on the porch with her arms crossed, watching me like she'd been waiting all day for this moment. Her husband, my brother-in-law, was leaning against the doorframe behind her. Neither of them said anything. They just watched me stand there in the drizzle, still in my work clothes, still holding my car keys, trying to understand what I was looking at. My name is Claire. I'm 29 years old. I'm a freelance accountant. And up until that Tuesday evening in March, I had been living in my older sister's spare bedroom for 14 months, while I saved enough money to put a down payment on my own place. I want you to think about someone in your life. A sibling, a cousin, a friend, someone you trusted completely, someone you would have done anything for. Now I want you to imagine coming home from a full day of work, tired, hungry, just wanting to sit down, and finding everything you own soaking in the rain. That's where my story starts. I need to back up a little, because the lawn wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came 6 weeks later, when a federal agent called my cell phone at 7 in the morning and asked me if I was aware that I had a registered sole proprietorship operating in the state of Georgia. I did not. But we'll get there. My sister, I'll call her Dana, is 4 years older than me. Growing up, she was the responsible one, the organized one, the one who had a plan for everything. When she married her husband Greg 3 years ago, I was her maid of honor. I gave a speech at the reception that made half the room cry. I meant every word of it. I genuinely believed she was one of the best people I knew. When my own apartment lease ended 14 months before that rainy Tuesday, Dana was the one who called me first. She said she and Greg had the spare room, they weren't using it, I could stay there while I saved up. She said a number $800 a month, utilities included. I said yes. I transferred that amount to her account on the first of every single month, without missing once. I have every receipt. I also cooked dinner 3 or 4 nights a week. I watched their dog when they traveled. I drove Dana to a medical appointment last January when she couldn't drive herself and Greg was out of town. I did not think of these things as favors I was keeping track of. I thought of them as what you do when someone opens their home to you. You show up. You contribute. You make it work. For the first year, it did work. Or I thought it did. Looking back now, I can see the small things I missed. Dana canceling plans with me twice in a row and not rescheduling. Greg going quiet when I walked into a room. Dana asking me in February if I had any idea when I might be ready to move out, even though we had never set a timeline. I told her I was hoping for summer. She nodded and said nothing else. I thought we were fine. We were not fine. On that Tuesday, I got a text from Dana at 4:47 p.m. while I was finishing up a client call. It said, "Your things are outside, don't come in, key doesn't work anymore." 7 words that ended a relationship I had spent my entire life building. I drove home. I kept thinking of it as home, which made everything worse, and I found what I found. The wet lawn, the open laptop bag, my grandmother's ceramic jewelry box, the one with the painted blue birds on the lid, sitting in the mud next to the garden hose. I picked up the jewelry box first. I don't know why that was the first thing I moved. I stood there holding it with both hands and I looked up at Dana on the porch and I asked her what was happening. She said I had been taking advantage of them for over a year. She said I hadn't been paying enough. She said I owed them for all the extras, and when I asked what extras, she listed things like the electricity I used working from home, the grocery runs she claimed she'd paid for that I never asked her to, the wear and tear on the bathroom. She said the number I owed them was somewhere around $11,000. I want to be very clear. I had paid her $800 every single month for 14 months. That is $11,200. I had paid them almost exactly the number she was claiming I still owed. I told her that. I said it calmly. I told her I had every bank transfer on record. She said those transfers were for rent only, and that the rest was separate. We had never discussed anything being separate. Greg stepped forward then and said, and I want you to hear this. He said that if I made this difficult, They would tell the rest of the family that I had been living there for free and refusing to leave. He said they had already talked to my mom and my aunt. He said everyone already knew. I stood in my sister's wet yard holding my grandmother's jewelry box, and I understood, maybe for the first time, that I was not dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with people who had made a decision, who had a story ready, and who had already started telling it. I loaded my car. It took 4 trips. The laptop was fine, the bag had kept most of the water out. My grandmother's jewelry box was fine. Some clothes were ruined. A box of books I'd had since college was soaked through. I drove to a hotel 20 minutes away. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I thought about what Greg had said. That they had already talked to my mom. That everyone already knew. My phone had 3 unread texts from my mom. I opened them. The first one said, "Claire, Dana told me what's been going on. I'm very disappointed." The second one said, "I raised you better than this." The third one said, "When you're ready to apologize, call me." I put my phone face down on the nightstand. I did not sleep much that night. Here's what I decided, lying in that hotel room. I was not going to respond to any of it yet. Not to my mom. Not to my aunt, who I was sure had been called. Not to Dana. I was going to give myself 72 hours to think clearly before I said or did anything. I had learned, from years of working with financial documents, that the worst decisions get made when you're emotional, and the best ones get made when you slow down. So I slowed down. I found a short-term furnished rental through a friend of a friend. I moved in within the week. I kept going to work. I kept meeting my client deadlines. I did not post anything on social media. I did not call anyone in my family. I let the silence stretch out. And then, slowly, I started going through everything I had. I am an accountant. My entire professional life is about documentation. I had 14 months of bank statements, all showing the transfers to Dana on the 1st of every month. I had text messages, years of them, including one from 8 months ago where Dana had texted me, unprompted. "Just wanted to say you're the best roommate. You always pay on time and help out so much." I had that text. I screenshotted it the night I found it and sent it to my own email. I started building a folder. What I found in the folder, 3 weeks into building it, was something I had not gone looking for. I found it by accident, the way you sometimes find a cracked pipe. Not because you went looking for pipes, but because you noticed the water damage on the ceiling. I do taxes for small businesses. Part of my work means I occasionally run searches through public business registries to verify client information. I was doing a routine check one afternoon when, on instinct I still can't fully explain, I typed my own name into the search field. There was a result. A sole proprietorship, registered in my name, in the state of Georgia, filed 11 months ago. The registered agent address was a P.O. box I had never opened. The listed business activity was financial consulting services. The registration used my social security number. I sat very still for a long time. Then I pulled up everything I could find about that registration. The filing date, the documents attached to it, the contact information listed. The email address used to register the business was not mine, but it was close enough to mine that, to anyone not looking carefully, it could have been. It was my first name, my last name, 1 extra digit. The kind of address someone creates when they want to impersonate you, without being immediately obvious. I knew whose idea this was. I didn't have proof yet, but I knew. Here is what a business registration in your name can do. If someone is creative and careful, it can be used to open business bank accounts, apply for business credit lines, sign vendor contracts, and in some cases, apply for small business grants or loans. It can also be used to shift financial activity onto your tax record activity you had nothing to do with and didn't consent to. I want to pause here for a second and ask you something. If you found out someone had used your identity to open a business without your knowledge, what would you do? Would you confront them immediately? Go to the police right away? Or would you wait and watch and make sure you had everything you needed before you made a single move? I waited. I contacted a business attorney. Not to file anything yet, just to understand what I was looking at and what my options were. She confirmed that what I was describing was identity fraud, and that I had the right to report it to the state, to the IRS, and to law enforcement. She also told me that the more documentation I had before I reported, the stronger my position would be. I asked her how long I had. She said there was no rush on my end. Whoever filed the registration was the one in trouble, not me. So I kept building the folder. I found a vendor contract. It was attached to the business registration through a document I requested from the state filing office. You can request these, they're public record. The contract was for a small amount, under $5,000, for consulting services rendered. It was signed with my name, not my signature. My name, typed in a font I would never use. The vendor was a real company. I looked them up. I called them. The woman I spoke to was friendly and professional. She pulled up the account. She said they had been working with my company for about 10 months, and that all communication had come through an email address, the fake one. She said the payments had been made on time, so she had no complaints. She asked if there was a problem. I said I was doing an audit of my own accounts, and would be following up in writing. I thanked her, and I hung up. I sat with that information for a full day before I knew what it meant. Someone and I was becoming more certain with every document I found had set up a business in my name, used it to establish a financial footprint, and had been operating it for nearly a year. The business was small enough to fly under the radar. The amounts involved were not large enough to trigger automatic flags. It was careful. It was deliberate. It was also going to unravel completely the moment I reported it. I was 6 weeks out from being put on a wet lawn when the federal agent called. His name was Agent Marsh. He was from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. He said they had flagged some inconsistencies in a small business filing associated with my social security number and wanted to verify some information. I told him I was aware of the situation, that I had documentation, and that I had been in contact with an attorney. I asked him if we could schedule a formal call with my attorney present. He said yes. That call happened 4 days later. I want to be careful here about what I say and how I say it, because there are legal proceedings that I'm not going to discuss in detail. What I can tell you is this. I provided everything I had, every document, every transfer record, every text message, the vendor call notes, the fake email address, the filing dates. My attorney presented it all clearly and methodically. Agent Marsh asked me if I had any idea who might have filed the registration using my information. I told him I had a name. I told him why I believed what I believed. I told him about the 14 months I had spent living with this person, the access they had to my mail, to documents I kept in the spare room, to personal information I had never thought to hide from family. He wrote it all down. I also, and this part I had been preparing for longer than anything else, provided the records of every payment I had made to my sister's household. The bank transfers. The text message where she called me the best roommate. A second text, from 9 months ago, where she had asked me to use a specific transfer description because it was easier for her records. I had done it without thinking. I saw now what her records might have meant. After the call with Agent Marsh, I drove to my mom's house. I had not spoken to her in 6 weeks. Not since the 3 texts she sent the night I was put out. I had not explained, defended, or reached out. I had waited. My mom opened the door, and her face did something complicated, relief and guilt mixing together, the way a face does when it has been wrong about something for a long time and it knows it. I came inside. I sat down at her kitchen table. I put a folder in front of her, not the full legal folder, but a summary. The transfers, the texts, a printed copy of the business registration, a 1-page explanation of what identity fraud means and what the consequences of it are. I didn't say anything while she read. I let the documents speak. When she finished, she put her hands flat on the table and she looked at me and she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because you had already decided." She didn't argue with that. She knew it was true. She had received Dana's version of the story before I even knew there was a story being told, and she had believed it without asking me a single question. I told her I wasn't there to fight. I was there to make sure she understood what had actually happened. I told her that legal proceedings were underway, and that whatever Dana had told her, the truth was going to come out regardless. I wanted her to hear it from me first. I also told her something I had thought about very carefully in those 6 weeks of silence. I was not interested in her apologizing to me right now. An apology in that moment, while she was still processing, wouldn't mean anything. I told her that if she wanted a relationship with me going forward, we were going to have to build it on something different than what we had before, which was a foundation where she took other people's word over mine without a single question. She cried. I didn't. I had used up whatever crying I had left in that hotel room 6 weeks ago. I drove home. I made dinner. I went to bed. The proceedings took another 3 months to move through the various channels they needed to move through. I am still not going to go into specific details because some of it is still being resolved. What I can tell you is that the still is stalled. The registration was formally flagged as fraudulent, and the financial activity tied to it was traced and documented. The vendor company cooperated fully. The state filing office cooperated fully. Greg, it turned out, had been more involved than I initially realized. Some of the operational details, the vendor relationship, the contract structuring, had his fingerprints on them more than Dana's. Whether that makes Dana more or less responsible is a question I've stopped trying to answer. What I can tell you is what happened to the story they had told about me. My aunt called me in month 2. She had heard from Dana, from my mom, from the general family orbit that something serious was happening and that it involved Dana. She asked me directly what was going on. I told her, calmly, exactly what I had told my mom. I sent her the same summary folder by email afterward. My aunt is not someone who says much. She went quiet on the phone for a long time. Then she said, I owe you an apology. I said things about you that I shouldn't have said. I thanked her. I meant it. The family group chat, the one where I had apparently been discussed at length while I was loading my soaked clothes into my car, went very quiet after that. I got a text from Dana in month 3. It was short. It said she wanted to talk. I did not respond. Not because I was trying to punish her, but because I genuinely did not know what a conversation with her would accomplish at that point, and I had learned, over those months, that I did not need to respond to everything. Some things can just land and sit there. The jewelry box is on my dresser in my new apartment. The blue painted birds on the lid have a small chip on one of the wings from where it sat in the mud that night. I didn't try to fix it. I left it. It's a good reminder not of what was done to me, but of what I picked up first. Of what I decided, before I had said a single word to anyone, mattered enough to protect. I want to say something about forgiveness before I end, because I know it's the question some of you are sitting with right now. I've seen it asked in places like this. Can you forgive someone who did something like this? Should you? Here is where I've landed. 14 months of my life, and a federal investigation later. Forgiveness is not a thing I owe anyone. It's not a transaction. It's not something that gets unlocked when the other person apologizes or faces consequences. It's also not the same thing as reconciliation. I can let go of the anger, and mostly, I have without rebuilding a relationship with people who proved, at the worst possible moment, that they were not safe to trust. I still talk to my mom. It's different now. Slower, more careful. She knows she has to earn back ground she didn't realize she'd lost. And to her credit, she is trying. That counts for something. I don't know what's going to happen with Dana. I genuinely don't. There's a version of the future where we speak again someday, cautiously, with a lot of distance between us. There's a version where we don't. Both of those outcomes are okay. What I know is that I went from sitting in a hotel room with wet clothes and 3 angry texts from my mother to sitting in my own apartment, signed lease, my name on the door, nothing owed to anyone, with a folder full of documentation that told the real story from beginning to end. Nobody handed that to me. I built it carefully, 1 page at a time, in the weeks when everyone had already made up their minds about me. If you are someone who is sitting in the middle of something, a situation where you've already been judged, where the story about you is already out there, where the people you trusted have already taken a side, I want you to hear this. The truth doesn't expire. It doesn't care how loud the lie was. It doesn't care how many people already believe the other version. It just sits there, documented, waiting. Do the work. Build the folder. Give it time. Before I go, I always like to ask this. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read every single one. And if this story reached someone who needed it today, someone who is in the middle of their own wet lawn moment, share it with them. Sometimes you just need to know that the other side of it exists. I'll see you in the next one.